Welcome into WarUp on the WPIAL. Greg Warnock, Jeff Upson with you here as we recap last week's wrestling action, or even into this week's for that matter, and get you set for this coming weekend as we got some more exciting tournaments coming up. But Jeff, will start the show by talking a little bit about last weekend's dual action. There was several duels that took place over the weekend. Obviously, PA Power was there at the Hampton Dog duels, but you also had the Trinity duels, you had the Char Valley duels, Moon duels, North Hills duels. I mean, there were so many WPIAL schools wrestling in dual tournaments. But let's start with the Hampton Dog duels because there was a great performance that we want to talk about. First and foremost, though, the champion of the Hampton Dog duels was Malvern Prep, their B team, actually. They knocked off Seneca Valley in the final. Seneca Valley, the second place team. Plum wrestled a heck of a tournament. They finished in third place, defeating Kiski. But individually, what we want to kind of get to start off the show, Jeff, is Bode Marlow from Thomas Jefferson. He had one heck of a tournament going from 132 to 152 and knocking off a state place winner in Luke Sipes.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big performance for Bode. He's been close before. He's been chomping at the bit, so to speak, if you will. And I'm excited to bring him on and talk to him a little bit about his transition into his sophomore season. But yeah, it was a good win over Luke Sipes, who he had been off the mat for about eight months with a shoulder injury. So it was a good first test for Luke, obviously, getting a shot at Bode. But it was a good opening weekend of dual tournaments because you had a lot of WPIAL teams competing. We're going to talk a lot about the breakdown of the Trinity duels and the Moon duels. But at the Hampton duels, two things that impressed me a lot were Fox Chapel and Plum. Fox Chapel and Plum both looked really good. Fox Chapel, I didn't realize, has like 55 kids on their team. So that was kind of insane to see Coach Ron Frank. I'm like, where did you get all these people from? Right? He said running practices are insane because they basically have to run like two at a time. Plum beat Kiski, which was a good win for Plum. We were excited to see Plum after their Eastern area performance. So yeah, it was a good weekend, but definitely Bode Marlow was the highlight for me. Just getting to see him wrestle high quality content or competitor like Luke Sipes.
Well, let's go ahead and see if we can get Bode on with us here to chat a little bit about his weekend of wrestling action. And Thomas Jefferson, coming out onto the mats pretty strong here as well, trying to get their season on the right way as we wait here for Bode. Bode, how are you today?
How are you?
Good. Well, thanks for joining Jeff and I on WarUp. We really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Well, Bode, I guess the first question we wanted to kind of dive into, last year you wrestled at 132 pounds for the postseason, and this year you're starting out at 152. Talk a little bit about the weight adjustment. Obviously I'm sure you hit the weight room a lot and grew a lot over the past off season, but talk a little bit about the weight difference.
Yeah, I definitely gained a lot of weight, like 20 pounds. I also cut down to 32, so right after the season, I bulked up like at least like 15 pounds and then kind of cut down for some off-season tournaments and then just started hitting the weight room a lot. Gained the like last couple pounds of muscle, got to like 60, and now I'm down at 52 again.
Bode, one thing about last year, quickly before we go into obviously your performance from this past weekend, I know you mentioned you cut down to 32. Was the weight cut pretty hard for you? I mean, I know you wrestled a lot of that season at 138. Do you wish you maybe would have stayed at 138 for the postseason?
Yeah. Well, it was definitely a really hard cut to make. And, yeah, the 32 bracket was stacked, but it was good competition. I'm really happy I ended up cutting down. I probably would have had a better chance of making it to states at 38, but I mean, it was still fun to go 32 and have that competition with a stacked bracket at WPIALs. So I don't mind.
Yeah, it definitely was one heck of a bracket for sure.
Yeah.
Not obviously this past weekend you were on fire. You had 3 falls and a technical fall before having your matchup with Luke Sipes from Altoona. Talk a little bit about your matchup and your weekend as a whole.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I definitely went out there with a lot more confidence than I had last year. Just felt like older and stronger than everyone because I know I've been putting in a lot of work. And first couple matches, uh, I just went out there. I mean, they were good, but like it was just like not as hard. But then I seen how the teams were like stacking out and like how it was gonna end up. And I knew me and Luke were gonna have to verse eventually. So I was like, all right. And then I was pretty excited and pumped to wrestle him. And went out there, did my thing. I pushed the pace and ended up getting the win in overtime. It was pretty fun.
And Bode, you obviously got to wrestle him very early in the season, right? Is this good for you to kind of set the pace, set the tone for you? You know, you start off your sophomore campaign with a pretty big time win, and you roll right into King of Mountain. So what does this do for you afterwards? Kind of moving into the rest of the season.
Yeah, it definitely gives me a lot more confidence, I would say, and just knowing I can compete with people that were on the podium last year. Just not making it to states last year, it was a little bit discouraging, but it made me work harder. But now knowing that I've grown and am able to beat kids like this, it's really helped me out, and I'm pretty excited for this season, for this tournament tomorrow.
So we would be remiss if we didn't bring up Maddox Shaw, right? What is it like having
Yeah, you got
Maddox
you got to
in the
bring him up.
room with you? And do you ever feel like it's like Maddox Shaw's, his presence is like here? Do you ever feel like, man, like quit overshadowing me, dude? Like let me have my time too in the sun. Does that ever happen to you?
No, Maddox is my boy, and like I love Maddox. He's a really good guy, and we're really good friends even outside of wrestling. So yeah, he pushes me a lot there in the room and helps me get better. He's a great partner, but no, Maddox deserves everything he has, like all the fame. He pushes himself. He deserves it. So I don't mind being overshadowed. It's fine. He's
Well,
better right now, so I'll get there.
going into this weekend at King of the Mountain, 152 is a pretty stacked bracket, right? You got Cameron Milheim, Gabe Belga is in there as well. So when you look at the bracket and you say, okay, like this is my path, right? This is what I have to go through. I think it's a very doable path for you. But is this something you're like, okay, like I'm not in the top 5 or top 4 here, so let me show these folks what I'm all about.
Yeah, I definitely. I wasn't surprised, but I was like, all right, like they don't have me seated, so I'm just gonna go out there and like show them what I can actually do because they obviously don't think of me very much, but it's fine. And yeah, I don't know too many people at this weight because I definitely gained a lot of weight from last year. I know Cameron. I've wrestled in a couple of tournaments with him, but yeah, other than that, I don't really know. But yeah, I'm just gonna go out there and wrestle as best as I can, no matter who it is.
How do you feel with the weight at 152? You talked with Greg about kind of the cut last year, and as Greg mentioned, you bumped up a whole heck of a lot too. So, do you feel comfortable at 152? I had you ranked, I think, like at 139 to start the season, and when I saw you were at 52, I was like, okay, maybe he got a little bit bigger. But when I saw you at Hampton, it's like, okay, he got a lot bigger, right? You definitely filled
Yeah.
out. Do you feel like, man, 52 is the weight for you?
Right now, I'm pretty much sticking to 52, unless some I don't even know. I'm like planning on staying 52 no matter what through the whole season. So yeah, I definitely like grew so much, and I was wrestling tournaments this summer like Fargo and like stuff, and I was cutting down to 45, and it started just getting harder, and I was like, I still have time for the season. I'm just gonna bulk up and get as strong as I can, then go 52, and that's just what I did. And I feel like even though I went up a lot of weight, I'm just as big, if not bigger, stronger than everyone else at my 152. So
After last year, you had talked about how it was very disappointing for you to not make it to Hershey. How did you react to that? How were you using that as motivation? Did you go to Hershey to watch Maddox? And, what was the thought like, because you clearly were you had the ability to be there, right? But what was the mindset for you not being able to go to Hershey?
Yeah. So the mindset to not go to Hershey, I was definitely really disappointed. So I just took like a week off maybe after, and then right after that, I just started going to Quest and like Young Guns as much as I could because it was off season. So like there's no high school practices. And then I watched Maddox down at Hershey, and it made me really excited too. And then in the summer, I had like Super 32, Fargo, like all these big tournaments coming up, cadet duels, like. And yeah, I just started working as hard as I could, and I feel like it definitely helped because I feel like off season is when you can grow the most, like, and just then when the season comes, you're just that much better than you were last year, or that much better than the kids that didn't put in as much work as you. So yeah, my mindset definitely has changed a lot. I've been trying to get a better mindset as well over the off season.
Well, Bode, we appreciate you hopping on here this evening to join us for a few minutes to chat a little bit about your weekend from last weekend, and best of luck as you head to King of the Mountain and get underway at 152 here this weekend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Bode.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bode. Bode Marlow kind enough to join us on the show, and very confident, and you got to love that in him, Jeff.
I mean, I love it. I like just watching him wrestle this past weekend. I'm thinking, okay, like, even before the Luke Sipes match, I'm like, man, like he looked big, right? I mean, I was surprised he cut down to 32 last year, and maybe that was a factor, but man, like he just looked big. He looked strong. And I'm really excited to see him at 52 this weekend because, like I said, if you look at the King of the Mountain bracket, his path he's got a good path, right? He's on the same side with Belga from Cumberland Valley and Cameron Milheim as well. So I think those are all winnable matches for him. I wouldn't be surprised to see him win it all. And I feel like he has a little chip on his shoulder too, which he should, right? He just beat a state medalist, so good for him.
He's got the talent for sure. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I thought he was a heck of a wrestler last year as a freshman, and I think the weight cut was an issue for him. I mean, you got to look at everyone always says like, hey, you go down in weight and it ends up being a good thing. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it drains your energy. But 132 was so loaded. Where 138, there were some more holes. He had an opportunity potentially to get to the state tournament at 38. I felt like 32, it was going to be very challenging. So between the talent at 132 and the weight cut, where maybe he may not have as much energy, I think it's a combination where that's why he may not have gotten to that state tournament because of that. So, but you learn from it, and I'm sure he took that to heart as far as getting in the weight room and saying, hey, I don't want to feel like that again. And so far it's paying dividends, but still early in the season, and we'll see how he does here this weekend.
It is very early, yes.
Speaking of this past weekend, though, Jeff, we talked about all the other duels, and I think the biggest one that we got to talk about is the Trinity duels. So you had Trinity, you had North Allegheny, you had Latrobe. You also had Cathedral Prep, Wheeling Park, West Virginia, who's a pretty solid team. Penn Trafford was there. And Trinity comes out on top. I know you talked about last week. You mentioned watch out for Trinity, but Latrobe's coming into this as the preseason #1 team here in AAA in the WPIAL, and they not only lost to Trinity, they lost big. They lost 45-24. Obviously, you don't have Nate Roth, which we talked a little bit about, but we also didn't have Vinny Kilcarry in the lineup for Latrobe. But that's a lot of points to make up early in the season.
It certainly is, and I said to watch out because I thought Trinity is they're very well balanced. They're just from top to bottom, they're solid, and they're going to give up some bonus points, but they're going to squeak out some wins, man. They're gonna get some wins where you're like, man, the just hits keep on coming, right? Robbie Allison had a good showing. Bode Morgan as well. They both got falls. Ty Banco beat Wyatt Held. you know Luke Wilshell is going to get bonus. You know Leo Joseph is a tough hammer. But remember, he wrestled a freshman, Dom Canali of Trinity, and he only beat him 4-1. So that's a good win for him. But that can potentially switch on its head. So yeah, I mean, you don't have Vinny Kilcarry. That's huge. You don't have Nate Roth. Yes, that's equally as big. Could it be a different outcome in a few months? Sure, it definitely could. But right now, Trinity looks really good. It's gonna be crazy to think, when seeding comes along, because they're gonna look back at this and be like, man, Trinity, they beat Latrobe. It's an early season event, but still it has implications. So really good job by the Hillers. I was impressed with them. They got a couple solid wins, but that Latrobe one was definitely the most notable.
Well, I mean, we've had Phil Mary on how many times with us, Jeff. They always talk about that they look back at these matches. It doesn't matter that it happened in December. Remember they had that quad meet very early on when it was like Seneca Valley, Cannon, McMillan. You had all those teams. Like you had 3 of the top 4 teams, I think, or even 4 of the top 6 were all in that quad meet in early December. And Phil's like, yeah, we look at that. We're going to look at those results. It doesn't matter that it happened in December. That's how we get our seeding. This is going to impact seeding in a big way, especially if Trinity can run the table in their section. I mean, that's going to be a big if, and that could, obviously, impact things. But, this is a huge win. Not only did they beat Latrobe, but they also knocked off North Allegheny 48-18.
Yeah.
A team that North Allegheny beat Cathedral Prep 37-30, and Prep's one of the top teams in D10. So, yeah, I mean, Trinity had a heck of a performance, and if they can, run the table and set in their section, yeah, you could be looking at the top team in AAA.
I love hearing you're like shocked. You're like, I can't believe this. It is true though. I mean, it is. I mean, Trinity was quietly building and quietly, just coming along, and we're starting to see it pay dividends. Bode Morgan staying healthy is key. Robbie Allison, TJ Allison are key. Blake Rayner, he had a great weekend. He beat Nathan Monapart 3-1. That was a good win for him. TJ Allison beat Will Bentrim, beat him 5-1. These are all guys that need to show up and need to wrestle at a high level in order to get them over that hump, right? I'm going to see Trinity this weekend at the Panther Holiday Classic, so I'm very excited to see especially their younger guys. Their younger guys are the ones I really want to see, and they have some missing pieces that they didn't have before that are now there. Kale Nikela, who is now up to 189, he hasn't been in the lineup for 2 years, has been in and out, and now that he's there, he's at a weight that they really could use him at 189. So yeah, it's again balanced, man. They're a well-balanced team. I'm excited because we saw Cannon Mac and Waynesburg last night. That was a doozy, but each one had its vulnerabilities. Each one has its holes. So you're right. Trinity could be the team. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing with Trinity, you mentioned my surprise. I mean, it's because of how many they haven't been healthy. I mean, each year they've had so many injuries to try to battle back from that they just can't get a full lineup together. They just have between forfeits and just guys who aren't going to be able to get it done against this high.
They had guys at the same weights too that were hurting them. So yeah.
Well, let's dive into this one too, Jeff, real quick, because I think this was the highlight match, obviously, of yesterday. I mean, we'll get back to the duels and the tournaments and everything in a second. But Waynesburg beating Cannon McMillan 30-27. First of all, this is usually like the last match of the regular season, but it happens in week 1, and Waynesburg comes out on top, winning 7 matches as opposed to Cannon Mac winning 6. But what do you think of this matchup, and could it swing the other way?
Oh, hell yeah, absolutely could, because they did some goofy stuff in this one. There was some, and you can watch it all on PA Power Wrestling on our Rockfin page. We were able to stream it. Shout out to Buck Caldwell. He was able to pull through, and it was a great stream. It was a phenomenal stream by him. And it was a crazy match because you had Mazenko bump up to 114. Beats Kai Sheptick right at the end there. That was a big win for them. Sheptick still coming back from that knee injury. Mazenko, the number 1 ranked guy at 107 pounds for Cannon Mac. He bumps up, gets a huge win. it came down to him essentially, having to beat Luke Rush, and he majors him 15-2. He was close to pinning him, and it just didn't work out for him. But Joe Simone, he got a major decision for Waynesburg. I thought he was going to get a little bit more than that. Vinny Benny got a huge win, got a fall for them, and Andrew Benny got a tech fall. So things were going Cannon Mac's way, right? The interesting piece was Matt Furman went up to 215, right? It was Matt Furman's first wrestling of the season. He had missed Ironman. Both these teams were at Ironman. It was he bumps up to 215. He weighs in at 189, right above 172, and then they bump him up, and he wrestles Brody Evans, who's really tough, and he squeaks out a 2-1 win. That could flip, right? Yeah, and Rocco Welsh majors Stafford. He could maybe keep that to a decision potentially. So yeah, things can definitely change, but it was just goofy. I don't think I ever expected it to kind of end up the way it did, because both teams, like, they had to hunker down and protect their holes, and they ended up forfeiting to Mac Church. Nate Jones had a huge win over Josiah Gardner. I thought that was the biggest match of the night at 152. I said whoever wins 152 is likely going to win the dual meet, and Nate Jones comes up with a huge win. He's always coming up big for them. So yeah, it was a fun one, man. It was back and forth, a lot of decisions, but ultimately Waynesburg they figured it out. They had a little bit more, but it could be a lot different. I think it probably will be. The matchups will be different. The outcome could be different.
Yeah, especially once the 2 pounds goes into play. So Waynesburg with the win. Talk a little bit now about what's this look like for AAA. I mean, how do you see like the top 5 right now after you've seen what you've seen so far here in the AAA landscape?
Yeah, I mean that's the big question is where do the chips fall and where do they settle? And it's still pretty early, right? We still haven't seen a lot of the head-to-head matchups that we wanted to see yet, but overall, I think you got to keep Waynesburg at the top, right? They still have a lot of firepower. They can move in Roan Tustin and kind of use him as a piece to get in where they need to. So he's going to be huge for them. I still think it's Waynesburg, and then I'd almost point to Trinity. Trinity, that win over Latrobe and just the balance of that team. I'll wait. I'll hold to see after this weekend, after Panther Holiday and after King of the Mountain, to see really, what we're working with. But I would say you can have Waynesburg at the top. I would say Trinity and Cannon Mac and Latrobe are all kind of in a tier. After that, it's really tough to say. Like Kiskey's not the Kiskey of the past years. They have holes. They have guys that they don't have a full lineup. Butler's got a pretty good lineup. Pine Richland has a good lineup. Pine Richland and Fox Chapel had a good match last night as well. So, there's a whole lot of, like, I like to call it bubble teams, guys that are right there on the bubble. And it could be a plethora of different teams that make it out through. So, ultimately, I think,
and don't forget Hempfield.
Yeah, Hempfield. Yeah. I think Hempfield's. Yeah, I think Hempfield's good, but I think they're gonna have some holes and whether, and that's the thing. Like it's those other wrestlers. Yeah. We know what Ethan Lieben's gonna do. We know what Kapusta's gonna do. We know what those guys are capable of doing. Eli Carr has had a good year. It's the other guys, right? Those are the ones that you need to see and how they compete and who got better. Like Fox Chapel, like to me, it's insane that they got 53 kids out on their team and they're all, like, they have a full lineup and they're all pretty good. Like, they're all decent, right? They're going to give up some pins. They're going to give up some bonus points. But overall, when you can field a full lineup, you're already pretty far ahead, because sadly, even a AAA team has trouble fielding a full lineup.
Yeah.
If you would have told me that Kiski area was not going to have a full lineup, I'm like, that's crazy. But they don't. And there's a lot of teams that, they're just trying to beg guys to come out to fill in spots. So, I think Hempfield could be in that tier. Butler's the one I kind of have circled like, all right, let's see where they're at, because they have some guys that you're like, man, like they're close. They if they can put the pieces together, and I feel like Butler always finds a way. They always find some heavyweights. They always find guys that are just like, I just think of like farm boy strength. Like they're just tough kids. They're just strong. Like when I wrestled, it was Big Spring. Like we would wrestle Big Spring, and we're like, man, those guys up there in Newville are freaking strong. Like they may not be the most athletic or just the best, but damn, they're tough. I feel like that's Butler out here. So I don't know. It's a lot more open than I had anticipated, and I'm excited because I really do think it's all up in the air right now.
Well, some other schools we talked about, Seneca Valley finishing in second place at the Hampton Dog Duels. At the Moon Duels, you had West Allegheny as the champion. They beat Quaker Valley for the title. Quaker Valley beat Bethel Park 40-32. So Bethel Park we talked about last weekend doing well at the Eastern area, and then they come out against in the Moon Duels, and then they end up finishing in, I believe, in third place out there. So a couple more teams, Jeff, in AAA with those two performing well at the Moon Duels.
Yeah, I was really excited to see West Allegheny and Bethel Park, because Bethel Park had a great Eastern area. We know Coach Ty Nauman is getting the most out of his guys, guys that were kind of under the radar a little bit. And West Allegheny, I equate West Allegheny and Hempfield to kind of in the same boat, because they have their superstars, right? They have the Ty Waters, they have the Taddies, they have Nick Jones, they have Sean Taylor. Right, you have those guys, but then you have younger guys like Cooper Smith, and how are those guys going to do, right? Because we know Sean Taylor, Ty Waters, Nick Jones, like they're and Nico Taddy, especially that Nico's down at 145. They're always going to basically be favored in those weights, right? It's the other ones, right? It's the other ones, and West Allegheny, I'll give them credit because they looked good at the Moon Duels. It's interesting to see Seneca Valley do not as well. Although I think they were pleasantly surprised with how they wrestled at the Hampton Dog Duels. So yeah, I mean, I throw West Allegheny in the mix as well. Seneca Valley's got some struggles ahead. I think it's not the Seneca Valley of years past, right? But Plum, Fox Chapel, those are my big takeaways, man. Both those teams look really, really good.
Chartiers Valley Duels were also this past weekend. Chartiers Valley finishing in second place. Franklin Regional was your champ there. They won 42-30, and also had the North Hills Duels as well, where North Hills was the champion in that one. So a lot of duels from the WPIAL from this past weekend. But another thing to mention for the WPIAL, Jeff, obviously was the Ironman tournament. 3 guys from the WPIAL end up getting on the award stand. Rune Lawrence of Fraser finishing in third place, but then you had the 2 guys from Waynesburg, the studs, Mac Church and Rocco Welsh, both champions of the toughest tournament in the U.S.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and this is the second show of the day for me. My voice is getting a little hoarse, but we talked about it earlier on the Power Hour, and Mac showed a lot of emotion after winning that, because he had been in the finals. This would be his third trip to the finals. Lost his freshman year, his junior year, and of course this year he won it. So he needed that win. I think just mentally and emotionally he needed that win. Rocco, this is his second championship, so it's kind of business as usual for him. When you look at Rune Lawrence, he was right there, right? And outside of his one loss, he was pretty dominant. He got a fall in the third and fourth place match. So Andrew Binney had a good tournament. I believe he made it to the blood round. He was close, if not at the blood round. So Andrew Binney, I thought, continued to have a good start of the season. He had a really good surge tournament. So yeah, it's good to see these big guys, get tested early, but it's those other guys that I wanted to see, and it's a shame Matt Furman couldn't go there, because I think this would have been a good test for him, a good tournament, but he's got to get healthy, and he's back for King of Mountain.
So we should See how he does here this coming weekend. We're going to preview that in a moment. But first, let's talk a little bit about a couple of matches that took place. We talked about Waynesburg, Cannon, McMillan already, with Waynesburg getting the win. You alluded to Pine Richland. They had a 35-34 victory over Fox Chapel. And then the highlight match we always look forward to every year, AA versus AAA. Burrell taking on Kiski area. And Burrell gets the better of Kiski area this year, 36-34.
Yeah, we'll start with Pine Richland and Fox Chapel. Man, that was a very close match, and ultimately it came down to the first two bouts. Both Dom and Anthony Ferraro, they got pins, and Anthony was the one I thought, okay, it would be close with Josh Alexander, and Ferraro gets a huge pin there, which ultimately was the difference. I think Mac Miller got a tech fall for them, and of course Vaughn Spencer from Pine Richland is still not in the lineup quite yet, and I'm told he's close. Pine Richland made it to did they win the state championship? I think they won it in football, and
They did.
Jake Lucas was in there at 172, got a big win. So yeah, I mean, again, you've got a team like Pine Richland that has these big names, right? The Ferraros. I'll call Mac Miller a big name because we definitely talk about him a lot. Jake Lucas and Vaughn Spencer. But is that enough to carry them, right? We'll see. But Fox Chapel, man, they were right in there. And of course the Kiski Burrell match, always a fun match, always a competitive match, no matter what. Like if one team's down, it doesn't matter. Like they wrestle up to that level, I feel like. And of course this one came down to to almost the last match, and unfortunately Kiski just doesn't have anybody at 133. So Cooper Hornak gets a forfeit, and Burrow ends up winning.
Well, we should see some good wrestling this weekend, talking about the tournaments. But how about the Kiski area Cavalier duels? We talked a little bit about AAA and where some of these teams are going to fall into place. Listen to the lineup card here for this weekend, Jeff. Obviously, Kiski hosting it, but you got Hempfield, you got Butler wrestling in this one, North Allegheny, Penn Trafford, Waynesburg will be there, Norwin, Peters Township. Fort LaBeouf is coming down for it. Quaker Valley is going to be in it as well as far as AA schools. So you might get some more clarity on AAA here this weekend.
You're 100% right, and this is the best weekend for clarity from a ranking standpoint, because the King of the Mountain, Panther Holiday, and some other ones like Beast of the East, this is where we see the rubber meet the road, in my opinion. Ironman is not a really good test because it's such a tough tournament, right? I like the Cumberland Valley kickoff. I like the Char Houston and Eastern area, and those that kind of set the benchmark. But really, it's this weekend, mid-December, that we see everything kind of pan out, right? The King of the Mountain has historically always done that, and Panther Holiday is continuing to grow. It's got 48 teams from all across the state. It's more of a AA focused tournament, but a lot of AAA teams are still there. And from this dual standpoint, the Kiski duels are loaded, right? You had mentioned all those teams, and how many of those teams did we talk about being kind of in the mix? I think from a team standpoint, we're going to have a lot of clarity as to who is in the conversation this year, especially in the WPIAL. So yeah, it's going to be fun, man. Monday after this weekend, it'll be very easy for me to sit down and say, all right, this is how they rank. This is how they shake out.
Well, speaking of King of the Mountain, we'll see some WPIAL schools there in this one. Let's go through some of the weight classes, Jeff. And as far as the weights go, do you have any in particular you're most excited about? I want to talk about first.
Well, I mean, obviously, I have my favorites. 139. How can you not be excited about that? You've got two state champions and a guy who was third in the state with Maddox Shaw. So yeah, Dalton Perry, Pearson Manville, both in the same bracket, and then you throw in Maddox Shaw. Yeah, it's a pretty damn good. And then Connor Saylor as well, right? So yeah, 139 is the highlight one for me. But if you start at 107, Tanner Mazenko is currently the number one ranked wrestler in the state in AAA. He's there with Aaron Seidel, who's the top seed. Clearly, he's the guy, state champion. But this is going to be a good test for Mazenko to see if he's the real deal or not, right? Keanu Dillard from Becca's out. He's injured. So there's a lot more openness to 107 in AAA, and some guys haven't come down that I think will eventually be there. But yeah, 107, it's going to be a good weight for him to see where he's at. But Aaron Seidel is the guy. Keep an eye on Cam Baker from Burrell, and Dom Deputy of Chestnut Ridge in there. Yeah, it's going to be fun at 107, but 114 has WPIAL written all over it, right? Because you have Luke Wilshell as the top seed, you got Ty Kapusta as the second seed, and then Connor Smith is the third seed. So yeah, there's a lot of WPIAL talent there at 114 pounds.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun to see how those guys shake out. I'm sure Wilshell, Kapusa, probably, and even Smith for that matter, tired of bumping heads, especially after last year. But back at it at 114, do you anticipate at least one or maybe multiple of those guys going down to 107?
No, I mean, maybe Kapusta, but that I don't know. I feel like he got pretty big over the summer. And I think he's looking to get a little bit bigger for college now that he's into his junior year. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of guys are seeing where other folks go, but I really don't see Luke Wilshell or Ty Kapusa going down. I could be wrong.
Yeah, 121 pounds. Brandon Damai of Cannon McMillan, he comes in at number 4. Leo Joseph of Latrobe comes in at number 5 as far as WPIAL guys.
I'm excited to see Leo Joseph and Damai potentially wrestling in the quarterfinals. That's another good barometer to see, where they're at. Both those guys have been very close. Damai made it to the state tournament last year, so looking forward to seeing if he can keep that going.
Tyler Chappell is the Seneca Valley's top seed at 127, and Andrew Binney of Cannon McMillan, he comes in at number 6 at the weight.
Yeah, this is a huge weight. There's a lot of studs here. You got Cohen Bainey on the bottom half. You got Seamus Mack from Hempfield in there, Gavin Sheridan as well from Boyertown. But Andrew Binney's the one I have circled to see how he's going to do. He's likely going to have to see a Mack in the quarterfinals and then a Bainey in the semifinals if he wants to get there. So yeah, this is going to be a good test for him. But Tyler Chappell, hey man, you got nothing to lose. You're committed to Pitt. It's your senior year. I want to see him let it fly because we know when he opens up, there's not many people that can beat him, right? He's just one of the best. He's got to stay out of his own head. And I think after last weekend, he had a really good match with Jason Torres. Really looks good. So I think he's feeling pretty good.
Yeah, it's always I think we talked about that about his brother as well, Jeff. Right? And if he could just open up his offense and not think about it, he can beat anybody. So, it seems like it just must run in the family, I guess. But we'll see if he can do that. 133, Cooper Hornack of Burrell is the number 3 seed. This is another very tough bracket.
I mean, it's super loaded, right? 133 and 139 are two of my favorites when you have Luke Simcox and you have a state champion, Scott Johnson. But for me, Cooper Hornack, I mean, he's number 2 in the state. So the semifinals could be Scott Johnson versus Cooper Hornack. Scott Johnson is I'll give him the edge for sure, but I wouldn't count him out. Keep an eye on Zach Hill from Seneca Valley. He's a tough freshman. I'm excited to see him and see what he can do because he's on the side of the bracket that I think he could make some noise potentially.
Yeah, I touched on 159. Also, in addition to Maddox Shaw at 3, you got Nico Farah of Burrell coming in number 6.
Yeah, I mean, this is all the talk is going to be, Dalton Perry, Pearson Manville, and Maddox Shaw. So you're going to have some people overlooked here, but Farah is going to be again. It's not. This is always a good test for King of Mountain because you have so many different schools from different classifications there competing. And even if you don't place, you could still potentially get some quality wins under your belt.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you look at 145, Nate Stone of Franklin Regional. He claims a number 5 seed in another tough, weight class as far as high-end talent.
A lot of high-end talent here, a lot of District 6 high-end talent with Griffin Walliser and Asher Cunningham. You got Callum Bowman as well in there from District 5. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how this shakes out at 145 pounds. Nate Stone is somebody who I think has to have I think he's going to have a good weekend, but it's a deep weight class.
So we touched on 152 with Bode Marlow, and he was on the show with us, but he comes in at the number 5 seed. How do you like his chances here against some of the guys leading up to potentially wrestling Belga in the semis, and then potentially Milhelm, or excuse me, in the quarters, and then Milhelm in the semis?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he probably would prefer to be on the bottom half, but you got Parrish McFarland, you got Carter Davis down there. Either way, you're gonna have to wrestle him, right? So why not take out the fourth and first seed if you're gonna go out and do it? I like his chances. I like his shot a lot. I mean, if he wrestles like he did this past weekend, he could win it. Milheim's a very accomplished wrestler, both freestyle and folk style, but Bode has looked good, so I do like his chances.
Yeah, 160 pounds. Gavin Beck of Franklin Regionals, a number 2. Wyatt Shoemaker of Latrobe, a number 4 seed.
Yeah, and this is I wish we had Chartiers Valley come in here, because Nick Kunstek and Dylan Evans could have a rematch from Powerade last year. But it opens up the door for Gavin Beck. Gavin Beck, who I feel like's been around for 6 years. This is going to be a good test for him on that bottom half. I think he's the guy. I think he's the guy to make it to the finals.
So you mentioned Matthew Furman wrestling 215. He's at 172 here for this coming weekend as the top seed.
Yeah, he's I think he's down to weight, right? I don't think he's got to worry too much about wrestling up to 215 much more. You got Lisinski as well from Burrell on the top half. But yeah, it's definitely not as deep as some of the other weights that we saw, but still you got Caleb Close, a state medalist. You got Macon Myers from Central York, who's a state qualifier. So overall, I think this is for Furman. He had a really good King of Mountain last year. I think he could have the same kind of experience this year as well.
You got Marion of Franklin Regional, the number 2 seed of 189. You also have Stafford of Cannon McMillan, the number 5 seed at this weight.
Yeah, this is a sneaky good weight, 189 is, because Bechtold is the headliner, being a state medalist, and Marion as well. But then you got Sam Milligan as well, Carr Bartram from Northern. Cole Bartram was a state medalist. You got Magnus Lloyd from Jenner McLean, who had a great Char Houston tournament, beating Vitaly Daniels and Brendan Morgan. He's on the bottom half. That could set up a really good quarterfinal with Marion. So yeah, I'm excited to see, because again, you got guys from different districts. I'd like Owen J. Roberts coming out here, but then you have Gabe Stafford as well in the top half. A lot of things could go, awry here, and seeds could get thrown out the window. But overall, pretty deep weight class.
215, Latrobe's Corey Borio comes in at number 2, and I also got Luke Boylan from Burrell at number 5.
Austin Johnson, I talked about it on the Power Hour. I said, he pin his way through it, because all he does is pin. But I think Corey Borio is going to have something to say about that. Last year, he lost, I believe it was 11-4 to Johnson. I'm sure he's going to want to close the gap there. And Borio, I think he's the guy, right? I don't see a ton of roadblocks for him. Dean Bechtold from Owen J. Roberts is a tough freshman. And Zimmerman from Brookville is not bad, but Borio's a returning state medalist, and he's been getting better as the year has progressed. So, and I'm excited to see Boylan. He kind of flies under the radar outside of the WPIAL, so this should be a good test for him.
285, Wyatt Held of Latrobe checks in here as a number 3 seed.
Yeah, Wyatt Held just had that tough loss to Ty Banco, and I think this is going to be a good bounce back performance for him potentially, because he's in the mix. He's in the mix on the bottom half. Faribault from Strathaven is good, but especially when you get up to heavyweight, like anything's possible. But Nick Pavlechko's the he's head and shoulders, I think, the top guy here.
Any I know going through this whole the whole thing here that we didn't mention Vinny Kilkeary. Obviously, he didn't wrestle last weekend at the Trinity Duels either. Is there any concern there?
Yeah, I don't think so. Everything I'm hearing is not a great concern, but I mean, I think they're just precautions. Yeah, so I don't think it's a huge concern. I think they're just trying to make sure he's ready to go when it matters. Nate Roth is the one that I really want to see. I understand why he's not wrestling, but I also really want to see him. his first match last year, he beat Briar Priest. So, why not come in this year and knock off, I don't know, someone really tough.
Well, looking at the other tournament that we got, the Panther Holiday Classic as well. Talking a little bit about some of the schools and all the teams you got going on here. As far as the WPIAL, at the first weight of 107, Jeff, Armstrong, Braden Stull is the only one here at number 8. So Mickey Horns at number 17. So not too deep here in the WPIAL here at 107.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good tournament, and it's got a lot of teams from all over the state, a good mix of AAA and AA. I really like this one, but the WPIAL is represented by Armstrong. They've got Trinity there as well. Bentworth is there, so we're going to see Chris Vargo. But yeah, 107 is way more wide open than most tournaments. Nico Finella from Indiana is the second seed behind Landon Baney at 114. I'm excited to see him because we've seen him compete at a high level, but we haven't quite seen him, I think, get that. He's still pretty bummed out about not getting a state medal. I'm pretty certain of that. So this is a good chance for him to kind of redeem himself. If he can get out and knock off 2-time state medalist and Landon Baney, who's been so consistent in his career.
121 pounds, not a lot of top seeds as far as that. Carter Putt of Indiana is the first one at number 5. Dom Kennelly at Trinity, number 8. 127 though, Jeff, you got the top seed in Chris Vargo of Bentworth. You got TJ Allison of Trinity checking in at number 3. Sean Kane of Mount Pleasant, number 6. Lucas Barr of McGuffey at number 8. So a lot of WPIAL power here at 127.
Yeah, and you're going to see some Mount Pleasant guys with Sean Kane. Sean Kane is a guy who I think's been really consistent for Mount Pleasant, but really TJ Allison's the one here who I want to see because you got Chris Vargo is the top guy here, right? Chris Vargo has been so damn good. He just something goes on at Hershey and he hasn't quite gotten to the level where I think he could be, but. And it's a good weight class because you got Dean Hauser, who's a returning runner-up, and he's a state medalist as well. I'm excited to see Lucas Barr from McGuffey. I've heard a lot of really good things about Lucas Barr. A lot of people are excited about him, so this is going to be a good test to see where he's at as a freshman.
133, the WPIAL not so top heavy as Ben Lukatic of Bentworth, your top wrestler, the 8th seed. But yeah, 139 pounds, you got the top seed in Blake Reener of Trinity. You also have Greg Shawless of Mount Pleasant checking in at number 3.
Yeah, I mean Reener's been fire recently. He's been really good this off season and to start the season. He's a guy that I've been impressed with the last 2 years. And he's I think making a lot of strides where we're seeing some other guys that were in that tier kind of fading back a little bit. He's kind of accelerating forward. So this is a good test for him. Greg Charles as well, a tough junior, not always the guy that you hear about, but I think he's going to have a good tournament. And there's a couple tough freshmen here that I want to see. Cross Cassidy from Bedford, younger brother of Caden. Owen Ivick of Bentworth is another really good freshman that I've heard a lot of tough things from him. And I think that Bentworth team, man, like they're pretty solid. They're another small school. They're partnership with Charleroi, and I think you're going to see some individuals do really well for them here.
145 pounds, Jamison Pokliembo of Mount Pleasant is your number 2 seed. 152, the first WPIAL wrestler to come on is Robbie Allison of Trinity. He's a number 11 seed.
Yeah, Robbie Allison is one of those guys. I mean, 52 is a deep weight class. You got Luke Sipes, Ty Watson, Dustin Flynn right out of the gate, and Marcus Gable as well, George Campbell, Ian Wilson. So, yeah, this is a deep weight class. Robbie, I think, is in a position where he can knock off some guys and have a good tournament. Will Turner as well from Indiana. I thought Turner was tough. Maybe hasn't had a breakout quite yet, but he's in the mix.
160 pounds, the top seed for the WPIAL is all the way down at number 12, Braden Taggart of Bentworth. He's a freshman, though. We keep talking about Bentworth and some of the guys that they got going into this. Maybe we need to talk a little bit more about them in double Jeff. But then you look at the 172 pounds. Kyle Brookman of McGuffey comes in at number 12. Bode Morgan of Trinity comes in at number 7.
Yeah, Bode's that guy who, and I talked about it on the Power Hour. I mean, as a youth, like, he used to beat Ryan Garvik. They would go back and forth, and Garvik, made it to the state finals last year. And Bode Morgan he's battled injuries. I think, the weight was always kind of a tough thing for him, and finding the right weight. Now he's up to 172, where, I'm hoping to see him settle in and do really well, because I don't think we've seen him at his full potential quite yet.
189 pounds, Vitaly Daniels of Bentworth checks in at number 2. 215 pounds, Connor Jacobs of Armstrong is your top seed. But number 8, Dylan Pitzer of Mount Pleasant. Could we see a heck of a quarterfinal matchup between Pitzer and Jacobs?
I think so. Connor Jacobs is that guy, right? He was 5th here last year, but that was down at a whole nother weight at 172. That's almost 40 pounds ago. Connor's come on strong. He's committed to Clarion. He had a really good tournament here last year. I know I got some grief by some of the Armstrong natives and coaches that were like, "What the hell, man? Like, why aren't you're not giving our boy Jacobs enough respect?" And I think he definitely got it this year with the top seed. But Dylan Pitzer, man, Pickle's tough. I got to see him at the Hampton Dog Duels, and man, he's he's a lot of fun. He's a lot like Dayton, so that's a problem for anybody he's going to wrestle.
And then at 285, Ty Banco of Trinity comes in at number 2. Corbin Johnson of Armstrong at number 10.
Yeah, and Ty Banco could potentially face Emmanuel Ulrich from Mifflinburg, one of the top guys in the state in Dubway, and that could be a big win for him should he be able to knock him off.
So it should be a lot of fun. You're looking at not only these two tournaments and seeing where they go, but then also the Kiski area duels as well. So between those three, we're going to have a lot to recap next week for you, Jeff. But then in addition to that, we're going to be right set before the Christmas holidays. So we're going to have those three to recap, plus the matches from this week. But then we also have this little tournament called the Power Raid coming up. We're going to have to preview next week as well, in addition to the Southmoreland tournament and the others. But going to be a jam-packed show next week.
It certainly is. I'm already looking forward to it. I'm tired from today, but man, like wrestling season's here. It's not going away. It's here. Buckle up.
That's right. No doubt about it. I want to thank Bode Marlow of Thomas Jefferson for joining us here today. For Jeff Upson, I'm Greg Warnock. We appreciate you listening in to War Up on the WPIAL.